All right, folks, welcome to Frogs and Toads of Iowa with Jackson County Conservation. My name is Jen Meyer, and I will be presenting this evening. In the chat box, I've put in my email in case you missed something or you would like a copy of the program later. Tonight's program is being recorded and will later be available on our YouTube channel, Jackson County Conservation. And feel free to share that with your friends. We'll put a link up on Facebook as well. So it is spring here in the Midwest, and one of the most wonderful sounds we can hear are the frogs and toads waking up and making their calls. So the frogs and toads here in Iowa, the calling is made by the males, and their voice is heralding their presence and saying, "Oh, I'm here and I am available. It is baby making time." So as we progress along tonight, we will see photographs of the species and we will also be listening to their calls. So starting April 1st, citizen scientists, so I volunteered my time with the Iowa DNR to have a frog and toad survey. This is something that you too can participate in. I'll be talking a little bit more about what that training entails. But the Volunteer Wildlife Monitoring Program through the Iowa DNR does give everyday folks the opportunity to check in on Iowa's non-game species. So in Iowa, we have game species and non-game species. So those that we pay a license for to be able to hunt when in season with limits, and then there's everything else. So the everything else pile is more than 1,000 different species, and that is our insects, our songbirds, frogs and toads, uh, everybody else that we don't have a license for. And species that we just don't hunt, such as the occasional wolf that might come down from Minnesota or Wisconsin. We don't have a season for those. All right, if you are interested in learning about juvenile frogs and toads, I highly recommend that you download this PDF from the United States Geological Survey, and it is called A Field Guide to Amphibian Larvae and Eggs to Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. This is a free download. I just typed in Iowa frog identification, and this was one of the items that popped up, and I found it to be incredibly useful since the glories of metamorphosis with our amphibian friends make the juveniles or the tadpoles almost unrecognizable compared to what their final adult form will be. Having this guide is very useful, and it goes through the morphology and what key characteristics we're looking for, in addition to nice basic line drawings. So you really get a feeling for general characteristics of the species versus a snapshot photograph, which might give you one individual's unique characteristics in addition to, just like my freckles are probably not in the same spot as your freckles. As we go along, you are more than welcome to drop your questions down into the Q&A box. Since I am the only person moderating tonight's event, I won't be able to read those until I'm done with my presentation, but I will be sure to read those, go back and answer your questions, or at least get you pointed in a direction of where to start looking. All right, I don't see anything in the Q&A box so far, so I'm going to go ahead and share screen with my presentation. And make sure you've got the volume on tonight, folks, because you're really going to want to be able to listen to the different frog and toad calls. Okay, so here we go. So this presentation was originally assembled by Stephanie Shepard with the Iowa DNR Wildlife Diversity Program. She is the lovely lady who goes around and gives these trainings for citizen scientists. So this is a training that I've been through, and I find it to be a very pleasant evening. So anytime I have questions about my route or a species, or I need help identifying something, she's my go-to lady and is very easy to work with. I've modified this presentation a little bit to be more Jackson County specific. And we're going to start off here with a little bit of amphibian morphology. So the word amphibian literally means born in the water, lives on land. So this duality of their life cycle. And tonight we're focusing on the frogs and toads, but we do throw salamanders in there because they are our amphibian friends and do also lay their eggs and go through the complete metamorphic cycle. So with our frogs and toads here, you'll notice the top two illustrations indicate a dorsolateral fold. So these are these ridged areas that extend from behind the eye down the back, running parallel to the spine. Now with our toad here, you'll see that there are these cranial crests in the parotid glands and their warts. Frogs lack that type of texture. All toads are frogs, but not all frogs are toads. They are their own unique little grouping here, and those parotid glands to help them excrete a substance that makes them distasteful to predators. And then their lovely little feet down there. So the toad has more truncated type toes. A tree frog is going to have suckers on its feet, and a true frog is that long, graceful with a web structure in between. With several of our species, the dorsolateral fold is going to be a great place to start looking for identifying features, and we'll point out some of those as we go. So here in spring, our amphibian friends are waking up from their winter's hibernation. Most of our species overwinter as an adult. However, we have mudpies and bullfrogs that may spend up to 2 or 3 winters as juveniles before making their final change. We can find our true frogs underwater. So on days where it warms up and that solar energy hits the ice, we can see these guys out swimming around. Toads like to go underground. They're the diggers, and in a little cozy niche like the spring peepers. So a pile of leaves in a rock pile, in your firewood stack, underneath bark of trees. And they can pull off this amazing feat by having an antifreeze quality to their blood. So it doesn't crystallize as it freezes. They simply just slow down. And quite a few of them come out every spring and join in with the noise. So where are we going to go to find amphibians? Well, anywhere they are going to be able to complete that double life. So a pool of water of some variety is utterly necessary. That can be a vernal pool. So vernal pools are pretty much just seasonal wet pockets. We see these a lot in wetlands. Marshlands, of course, are those perennial, wet, boggy type areas, but I've seen frogs successfully reproduce in unattended swimming pools, in stock tanks, in old coffee cans behind barns. So that source of water is crucial, but the actual source a little bit less so. Being bioindicators are canaries of the marsh. The frogs and toads really can give us a snapshot of water quality simply because their ability to absorb gas, do gas transfer through their skin makes them incredibly sensitive to pollutants in the water. We can see evidence of mutations, deformed limbs, poor populations, no populations, and if you make it to a body of water and you're not hearing or seeing amphibian activity, it's a great clue to you that that water is impaired in some measurable, significant manner. Back to our first stage of metamorphosis here are the eggs. And when they're floating around in the water, they're going to have very distinct patterns to them. So salamanders just have their jelly pile. You can see the dark forming juveniles within. The frog, little chubby orbs. Kids like to play with Orbeez these days, and they're these little cellulosic balls that absorb water and expand, and they're squishy. Toads form more of a necklace structure. Now, when they sink down in the water and get covered up by silt, they look like these crazy spiral type worms. And then something else that also gets confused for amphibian eggs in the bottom right here is this bryozoan mass. And that's actually a zooplankton and not at all an amphibian, not at all. They're kind of like shellless corals almost. Also, people find snail eggs, and they're not the only squishy little thing in the water, but they're definitely some of the most visible. Now, I saw this picture here from the Northwoods phenology calendar from the Cable Natural History Museum. Great place up in Wisconsin. They were very generous. I'm like, absolutely, you can use our film. And this takes us through the calling season, March through August, in the most fast and succinct manner. All right, I'm gonna wait for that video to load real quick. Okay, make it big. Oh, unavailable. Okay. All right, so the timing of frog and toad calls is very important. The earlier in the season, we're going to have different species than we will later in the season. And that's a really good indicator of who we should be listening for. So when we start back in March, we'll see that the first creatures to start calling from our amphibian group are things like wood frog, boreal chorus frog, spring peepers. Now here in Iowa, we just aren't quite in the range of wood frog, but I'm going to be adding them to us because the population stops right at our borders. I have a feeling that the creatures are in our state, they're just not well documented. Maybe not down in Jackson County, but if we make our way up to like Clayton and Allamakee, very possible. So let's go ahead and give this a listen. All right, so as we go through here, you'll notice that certain species drop out. It's because their mating season is over. Not that they've left the marsh, they've simply hushed their voices a little bit. And this is another indicator of health and diversity. I don't expect to do my 1st of April survey to hear bullfrogs, but if I'm not hearing my chorus frogs, then I get concerned. And that's something I make note of and tell Stephanie, especially if it's something that I heard a lot of last year. We do keep track of our findings. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close out of this and we'll move on to the next slide. So species and identification is important to be able to do by both sight and sound. And to be honest, getting into frog and toad surveys seemed a bit daunting to me at first, but in high school, I was in band and orchestra and I played in the brass section. And being able to equate the song from a marsh or a body of water to a piece of music really helped me understand that each species was simply a different instrument. And the song of the year plays out with different voices in different times. And the intensity and the quality of sound and when they come in and out with their voices gives me a clue as to their populations, just like I would know how many pieces were in the brass section. You get an intensity feel for it. So as I go along, I'm going to start with the earliest emerging species and working our way to the end of summer. So I got to hear our first chorus frogs this year back in March. Now these guys, as you can see from the image in the bottom left, they are so tiny. My dog was out one night and he kept snuffling around in the grass and the leaves. I'm like, what are you doing? And it's these little guys rustling around down in the leaves. And they're a very common species. We can find them statewide, and we look for those three little stripes down their back. These guys don't have the true dorsal lateral folds, even though their stripes on the back are in that general vicinity. All right, so the page numbers you'll see at the top of these slides refer to the Frog and Toads of Iowa booklet. And that is a lovely DNR-based publication. You are welcome to pick up a free copy at the Hurstville Interpretive Center. A $2 donation is suggested, however, not mandatory. So that's where those page numbers come from. So first sound here is just going to be one or two individuals calling. And then the second sound is a large group of individuals and possibly other species joining in. So the sound of these chorus frogs always remind me of like running a card through the spokes of your bike. And you'll notice that there's a very distinct crescendo. They get louder as they go and the sound becomes more intense. You can make your own similar sound by running your finger over a fine tooth comb. You'll have different success based on the thickness of the tines of the comb and the material it's made out of, but it's a good way to start. Today I got to do a version of this program with second graders and let them have their own musical instruments to make a spring chorus. Absolute ball. Now down the second sound here, this is going to be our group. All right, so as a group, it's quite a tremendous sound, and it reminds me of the little tree spirits from the movie Princess Mononoke. If you've never seen that film, I highly recommend it. It does have a great underlying environmental theme to it. Our next species is the spring peeper. Again, another early one, another very tiny little friend, and it's got the cute little X markings on its back. Again, this back is very smooth. No dorsal lateral folds are present. And these are most common in the eastern half of the state. We divide the state into quadrants with I-35 running north-south and I-80 east-west. A little chorus of spring peepers here. Let's listen to our small group of individuals. right. As a small child, I was always confused with spring peepers and baby birds. I was very concerned that baby birds were not asleep at the correct time. One of those wonderful mysteries that I got to sort out 30 years later. As a large group here, let's give a listen. All right, so a whole group of these little peepers here give a rather intense noise. I think it'd make great background music for a sci-fi. We did hear the low chuckling of another species we'll learn about here in just a bit. Like I mentioned earlier, these recordings are not solely one species. There's always going to be a little bit of overlap due to their emergence times. Our next group here are the leopard frogs. And when we do a survey, it is okay to be confused about your leopard frogs because they sound pretty similar. This is one of those where the different species I need to differentiate by sound. So if I hear a leopard frog, like, okay, but I need to narrow it down. When you go through the frog and toad survey class to do the monitoring, they do give you a CD you can keep in your car. I went ahead and saved it on my computer and saved them as ringtones in my phone. That way I can listen to them anytime I want. The first one here is the northern leopard frog that it has statewide distribution. You'll notice these guys have that true dorsal lateral fold running from the back of their eye all the way down to their little rumps. It is definitely the greenest of them all. I realize this photo is a little washed out, but you'll get the idea. And let's listen to him on his solo. With our leopard frog there, we have an uneven rubbery chuckle noise. I make this sound with the kids by blowing up a balloon, getting my thumb wet, and rubbing it over the surface. For the plains frogs, this is not one that I'm going to find here in Jackson County. It does have that kind of rubbery chuckle noise, but listen here, a little bit different. Okay, so with the plains frog there, it's still kind of that rubbery type noise. In the background there, we could hear those spring peepers and our toad friends as well. The southern leopard frog is in the far southeast, think Keokuk, Burlington region. This is not one, again, that I'm going to be looking for in my county, but climate is changing, habitats are changing. So this one, again, the noise is a little bit different, but this guy does not have a spot on his nose. The other two, the plains and the northern leopard frogs, have that spot between their eyes, up on the tip of their nose there, but not this southern friend. Let's give him a listen. This guy's call always reminds me of that uncle who wants to laugh at everyone's joke, but they're not really all that funny. So that real even noise. So the northern leopard frog, like I said, this is the one I'm going to be looking for here in Jackson County. Not the most common species, but common enough. And you'll see on the back here, those dorsolateral folds are nice and tan, a nice thick ridge, and the spots in between are highly irregular. They vary widely from individual to individual. All right, again, this is one of our early ones. I'm just starting to hear those emerge. It's a beautiful flurry of activity and awakening here in spring. So chorus frogs, peepers, then our leopard frogs. And we'll listen to a group of northern leopard frogs. And remember, because of emergence times, we will be hearing other calls in the background. Okay. The American toad, our lovely toad friend. No, he cannot give you warts. I'm sorry. The worst he's going to do is pee on you to become more distasteful so you don't want to eat him. Key characteristics of the American toad is the speckling or the dirty belly appearance. Some people tell me that they found black toads or very light tan toads. Again, just like humans, they do exhibit variance in skin tones. This is a great sound for kids to try to imitate. So if you've got little ones, I encourage them to go ahead and give a listen and then give you their very best trill. Let's give this one a listen. Since amphibians are ectothermic or cold-blooded, their body temperature depends on their surroundings. So the speed of the American toad call varies immensely depending on their air and their water temperature. So this example we just listened to was a warm night. That was a very fast tempo staccato trill that we got. Now, a group of American toads is almost deafening. This is one that you can hear for quite some distance away from the water. I hope everyone at your house has a chance to make their very own frog trill. If you ever want to call for your kids or a loved one in a public space, one quick frog trill is a great way to get their attention. We also have tree frogs. Now, these are the fun ones with the little suction cup feet. Their size can be as small as the tip of your thumb up to about plum sized. And I love their color changing ability. So the bottom left there, we can see one on a milkweed, and it's got kind of the gray underbelly. And the one to the right on the tree branch has more of a gray barky color. It does take several minutes for this change to occur. So if you wish to exhibit it or to watch them exhibit it for yourself, be patient. It's not going to happen right away. These guys we're going to see late April, May, and statewide distribution, so very common little friend here. Now we do have two species of tree frogs, the eastern and the copes. The eastern tree frog sound is a little bit slower than the copes tree frog, but they usually call together if at all possible. So that's one of those ones that I like to record. I just use the voice recorder on my phone, nothing special. And then I can tease it apart later and figure out, do I have both east and copes, or do I just have individuals of different temperature? And I'll do a little bit of listening. So the eastern one here is going to be the slower of the two calls. All right, in comparison, the Copes tree frog is going to be a little bit faster. All right, and then our third sound clip for these guys is a combination of the two. All right, so you can hear that there is a pitch difference between the two in addition to the speeds. These have been found statewide. However, they're not at my particular surveying route, but that's one of those things I want to listen for and see if I'm noticing any changes. Are there any members to our marsh orchestra who have joined or dropped out this last year? A little bit later again in the season, our May region is the pickerel frog. The children delighted in telling me that they have never heard in pickle frogs today. And to be honest, I had never heard of pickerel frogs before I began at the Hurstville Center either. Now, pickerel has pairs. You will see that there are paired blotches between those dorsolateral folds on the back of this guy. Excellent characteristic. The ones here in the images are rather tannish. I've seen them more green, but definitely an East Coast of Iowa species. These we don't see as predominantly as the other species. We do have them at the Hurstville Interpretive Center. It's one of those things I delight in to be like, yeah, they're here. Well, let's go ahead and give a listen to an individual or a small group of pickerel frogs. All right, this is another call that's fun to make by wetting your thumb on a rubber balloon. And let's listen to a larger group of them. All right, the call of these guys makes me think of someone who fell asleep in a recliner, so they're chin down, snoring. The cricket frogs are going to be middle to late of the season, so more of the end of May, June. Again, and they're a very common species, but a tiny little fella, that's for sure. The sound of these guys, marbles banging together. Also, the top rack of your dishwasher, if it's all full of glassware and you give it a good rattle. They do have kind of a triangle shape on the top of their head, very rough skin for a frog, but their foot shape does put them in the true frog group. Let's give these folks a listen. That sound never ceases to amaze me that it comes out of a tiny little animal. Right. So if you ever have an entire tub full of marbles, there you go. You now can reproduce a whole symphony of cricket frogs. Our bullfrogs are going to be signaling the end of frog and toad season here in Iowa. So this is going to be more of our mid-June through August period. Again, a very common species. And the top right picture here gives you a good look at that tympanic membrane behind the eye. It's that circular disc shape right behind the eye. That's actually where they're going to hear from. The size of that tympanic membrane is going to be pretty similar to the size of their eye, if not smaller. Now, these guys do have the multi-year tadpole. Down in the bottom left, that's a second-year tadpole with its legs. All right, the sound of a bullfrog is pretty much classic summer in my mind. This one reminds me of a cello, poorly tuned but enthusiastically played with one note. Here's our large group of bullfrogs. Reminiscent of a small plane droning by or the first day of fifth grade symphony. Bullfrogs are very large. They're the ones that people typically catch for frog legs for consumption. To collect these, you do need a fishing license, and there is a limit on how many you can have. These guys are voracious eaters. If it fits in their mouth, they're probably going to eat it. They've even been so enthusiastic as to have been caught eating ducklings before. Now, our green frog friend from first glance looks very similar to the bullfrog. But at the top right image here, you'll see that the tympanic membrane, that eardrum-like structure behind the eye, is much larger in comparison to the eye. Green frogs and bullfrogs have been found blue before, and this is just a skin pigmentation difference. As we learned in elementary school, you need blue and yellow to make green. So if you find a blue frog, it's because it doesn't make the yellow coloring. It's just a fun fact, and it's pretty darn rare to find them simply because they don't camouflage well and they get eaten. Like our bullfrog here, it is a late season creature. We are not going to have this time of year, though they might be out and swimming. They're just not ready to make those marital commitments, as they might say. Eastern half of the state, we're not going to find them all over. Pretty common, but not universal. Again, we can find these at the Hurstville Interpretive Center. So little banjo plunks there. To reproduce this sound at home, I stretched a rubber band out over the tips of my fingers and just kind of lightly plunked at it. With the kids today at school, I had some old checkbook boxes that I stretched rubber bands over, and then we used different thicknesses of rubber bands to see how the sound differentiated and made little guitars. It was great fun. Here's a listen to our larger group of green frogs. Okay, so the sound of the green frog, the bullfrog, and the leopard frogs don't carry quite as far. There's one of those are the species that I really do want to get closer to a body of water to be able to accurately take note of. Here's our comparison of green frog and bullfrog. Just to highlight again, those tympanic membranes on a green frog, it's larger than the eye. On a bullfrog, it is the same size or smaller than the eye. Now, possibly in our area, we could find those southern leopard frogs. Again, they don't have the little spot on their snout. Crawfish frogs are these lovely leopardy, speckly little guys, and mid-April, they're likely extirpated. So they're not an endangered species, but they are no longer in Iowa due to habitat pressure. Let's give a listen to this one though, because it's one that might pop up on a survey or if you go for a travel. All right, these little guys get their name crawfish frog because they will make use of little mud pockets and little water holes similar to way crawfish will, and they'll dig down. The Plains leopard frog, again, more west of us, but it's still possible. They do have that little spot on their nose, and the call's just a little bit different from the northern ones. Again, on the survey, it is a-okay to mark down leopard frog species if you're having a hard time deciphering which leopard frog it is. In other parts of the state, we might find Fowler's toads. So Fowler's toads have a creamy colored belly. With our common American toad, we notice that they have that dirty or that speckled belly. These guys lack that. And far southeastern corner of the state, however, again, with climate change, we may be seeing these further up north. Thankfully, toads are relatively easy to catch during the day, so this aids in the identification process. If you remember, our American toad was that quick noise. This one could be a little bit shorter, but no less intense. And as a group, all right, slightly lower pitch than the American toad with a shorter call. I imagine someday I will hear these overlapping on my survey route, but not yet. That's okay, it's still early in the season, still plenty of time for discovery. Woodhouse's toad, western 2-3 tiers along the Missouri River. Again, that buff colored belly. Fowler and Woodhouse, very similar. To find them different, to be able to differentiate between the two, I have to call in Stephanie Shepard for that one. The Great Plains toad is another one that is far western county and very splotchy, almost leopard-like. I love the differentiation between the light and the dark spots on this guy. Let's give him a listen. All right, this guy's a little bit more machine gun-like in its sound. The other one is the plain spadefoot toad. It's not a consistent caller. Most of these other species all here for several days, if not weeks. These guys just hit or miss depending on the waterfall. Far western part of the state, and they have vertical eye slits. Again, with our toad friends, that visual, in addition to the auditory confirmation of species, is always very helpful. All right, and let's listen to this little guy make his quack noise. All right. So here is our side-by-side comparison of the American toad, the Great Plains toad, and the Fowler's / Woodhouse toad. Again, differentiation between Fowler's and Woodhouse requires some professional help, and that's okay. I know that's one of those things that maybe someday I'll get good enough to start differentiating them, but since I don't hear them on a regular basis in my home territory, I realize that's a skill that's going to be some time in development. The wood frog is potentially here in Iowa. If you look at the map here on the right, it hugs the Mississippi River. And I can't imagine that this little guy is not somewhere in Iowa. It's just one of those that we need to start watching for. I wasn't able to find a good sound clip for him because he's not one that we are taught in the Frog and Toad survey. And I didn't want to introduce something that hasn't been peer reviewed and well studied by our state biologists. These wood frog guys, though, are very small, just like the chorus frogs and the cricket frogs. It seems like the bigger bodied frogs need more time to warm up and get going in the season. If you would like to do your own surveying, what we did tonight is a large portion of the training is taking a look at both the physical and the auditory features of each species. And don't fret if it feels like I just threw a semi-load of information at you. Being able to identify all the calls and all the physical features is one of those works in progress. Take time, be patient, put in a little bit of effort every now and again, and it'll all work out. To get certified to become a citizen scientist for the Volunteer Wildlife Monitoring Program, you do need to attend a training, and those are hosted by Stephanie Shepard. She hosts them statewide, year-round, depending on what species. So this time of year, it's all about frogs and toads. Later in the year, it'll be eagle nesting, and other programs arise. It's always good to check out the Iowa DNR website. And if you look under the tabs for conservation and then volunteer wildlife monitoring, you can find out what programs are available when the trainings are. And last I checked, the local frog and toad training is completely full. So the popularity of these events is wonderful and astounding. So if you're interested in a training, go ahead and give Stephanie an email. That way she can gauge how many trainings she should schedule based on interest load in particular areas. Then you need to be able to figure out what's your route. Where are you going to survey? You can either be assigned a pre-existing route or you can make up your own. I've done 2 different routes over the years. One route had 10 stops and I felt like I was driving for hours, and that wasn't quite so much fun. I love to take my kids with me on this type of survey because just as they learn the voices of their classmates or family members, they do learn the different calls of the frogs and toads, and sometimes they pick out things that I can't. Also, it's very important to have someone in charge of your flashlight and someone in charge of your thermometer. On that survey, you are going to be taking some weather data, and I'll show you the sheet here in just a minute. Also, be sure to take a nice sharp pencil with an eraser. After you get your training, you need to go out and survey 3 times. And the windows are set up so that we can hit different reproduction periods. First survey window runs from April 1st to May 1st. You need at least an air temperature of 42 degrees. So when I want to do my survey, it is a wonderful combination of weather and temperature and wind and traffic and school nights. The second window runs from May 7th to June 7th. We want the air temperature to be at least 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Third survey window, June 13th through July 13th, minimum air temperature at 55 degrees. Now you want to start your survey 30 minutes after sunset, but only until 1 a.m. Full moons do work the best for some reason. If it's rained in the last few days and the moon is out, frogs go nuts. I bet everyone's feeling rather refreshed, and it's great for them to be able to hear each other, to be able to see each other, because remember, it is just the males making the noise. Having a lack of background noise is always helpful. I try to spend about 10 minutes at each site, just kind of getting my bearings, letting my eyes adjust to the lighting change, and just to get into a groove of listening. Sometimes with these surveys, you are supposed to listen for a set time period, but say a large tractor drives by and you can't hear anything, then you need to pause your time and then keep listening. There is a spot on the sheet to record whether or not you had noise disturbance. On a route I used to do, it was next to the highway, and I was unable to get access with the landowners to be able to go down to the body of water. So I simply was not able to survey that just by my proximity to the creatures themselves. This here is a copy of my current survey route. So you can see here that there are just 4 sites, and it's in close proximity to my home. So that's something that was important to me, since I do want to make this a family activity, that I'm not out all night on unfamiliar roads. This is a path I regularly travel. I'm very comfortable with all of these. And when I was assigned this, I went out during the day with a buddy with a map, so we could give good visual confirmation of safe places to park. When I'm out in the vehicle, I'm in my personal vehicle. It's not a labeled county vehicle. And people will stop and say, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And you do get a little card with your training that says, "I am a volunteer wildlife citizen scientist. Here's who to call in case you have questions." That has been helpful to me in the past, but I learned from that experience. One guy was not so very pleasant, so I started sending out postcards. I use the Beacon Schneider County Assessor's website, and I can get access to images and addresses and find out who the landowners are, so I can send them a discreet little postcard and just say, "Hey, I'll be in your neighborhood. I'm doing my annual frog and toad survey. Here's my email address if I can answer any questions." And since then, I've not had any issues with people. However, curious dogs are sometimes a welcome surprise. Dogs are always fun. Sometimes they're a little bit intimidating as well. That's okay. Like I said, having a safe place to park off the road out of traffic is crucial. So I personally added our yard pond to my survey route because I figure I'm there every day. So I just list that as Site 5. I write down the address and I can take data there. There is absolutely nothing wrong with gathering up sounds and data from your favorite location. So this route here. She also gives me my GPS coordinates and a little bit of description. However, this is not enough for me to feel fully comfortable. That's why it's crucial to go out and drive your route in advance. So the data sheet here is pretty straightforward. At the end of the survey, you should have 3 data sheets to mail in, one for each survey window. However, some data is always more important than no data. So you can submit your data via the website. With your training, you get the login information, or you can simply make a copy of this and mail it to Steph Shepard. She always includes self-addressed stamped envelope with our yearly packets. So that's another welcome sign of spring in my mailbox is my tan folder from Stephanie Shepard saying it's Frog and Toad time. And she includes information about how the survey went last year, all of my data sheets, reminders and tips on where I can take quizzes to refresh myself or how the information is gathered. So you need some sky codes. You just need your power of observation for this one here. How much cloud cover? What is the rain like? It is not a deal breaker if it is just a light drizzle. That is not enough sound interference, and some species really get excited about that precipitation. Wind codes give us an idea of wind. Now, with my smartphone, I can just pop open the local weather app and find out right away. Gives me more accurate information. Now, relative call index codes here in the middle. This is how I judge how many of each species I'm hearing in an area. 0, nobody. 3 is constant full chorused. The 1 and 2 levels in between. So for a large population, a healthy population, I want my call index codes to be 2 and 3. I really want to hear a good group of individuals. That way they have a good blend of genetics out in their field. Contact information, how does Stephanie get a hold of you if she's got questions? And then I love the notes and comments section. I always write in things like, I saw bats tonight, or sheep got moved into the field next to the pond, makes listening for leopard frogs difficult. Little things like that gives her an idea of what's going on. And I also find it fascinating to refer back to from years present. I'd use it as my own little phenology area here, like what's in bloom or what trees are in seed. The back here is where we get down to business. You're going to write down your stop name. The NAMP route is the North American Amphibian Monitoring Program, and that is a little bit more intensive than the Iowa DNR citizen-based program. You could possibly end up with a NAMP route. There's just a little bit stricter, I don't want to say stricter, more information gathered. It's a little bit more involved of a process. So again, your name, your route number, your survey date, your window run, 1, 2, or 3, days since last rainfall. Again, I can just go to weather.gov, type in my zip code, and I can find out when it last rained, how much it rained, your time, wind code, sky code, air temperature. And you'll notice here that there is a start and finish to this section of what time, wind code, sky code, air temperature. Again, this gives us more information about what habitat and environmental changes are going on and how that plays a role in their call times. So I mark down at each spot what time I get there. I get to check off whether or not noise was a factor. Did I take a time out because of noise, or if one of the kids needed to use the bathroom? Just how it works. Is the moon visible? How many cars are driving past? Is the site wet or dry? Usually I can just take a flashlight, there's water down there or not. But to do this, most efficiently, it is nice to have a partner. I'm grateful that my oldest child is old enough to help me fill this out now, and he can count cars while I'm listening or vice versa. Sometimes he likes to practice too. And then we give our index call here. So under chorus frog, 0, 1, 2, 3. Do I hear none, some, a few, or a whole group? And I will do that for every single species that I hear at that particular spot. Now, if I don't hear any, I should just go ahead and put zeros across the board, just fill her up. Now, to be able to test yourself, this is a publicly available website. So you can do the public quiz, or you can do the National Amphibian Monitoring Program quiz. It's a little bit more difficult. They like you to really be able to differentiate overlapping calls, and I find it to be a good challenge. Parks and Refuge Challenge, I can't say that I've dug into, but I bet it is fascinating as well. So you just go ahead, you go through, you find your state, and then it does not give a step-by-step individual. It will play short clips of a few species together, and then you need to be able to pick and choose what species you're hearing. Now, what I love about this one is it'll give you a list of, here's what we played, here's what you marked. Do you want to listen again? The listening again feature is so helpful to be like, okay, I see what I did wrong here. And then you can go forward and go through it. This booklet that I mentioned at the beginning of the program, Salamanders and Frogs of Iowa, is a booklet you can get at the Hurstville Interpretive Center, recommended $2 donation. These copies that I have are a little bit older, so some of the genus group names have changed for individual species, but the identifying features and the life cycle history information is still correct. My resources for tonight are listed here. Very grateful to all of these lovely public sites. The Music of Nature is from Elliot Lang, and he has made a tremendous contribution of soundscape information and recording of species in their natural habitat. So the Music of Nature, I love it for frogs and toads, but honestly, birds, insects, all sorts of wonderful things here. So that takes us to the end of our presentation, and I am going to go ahead and check the Q&A box. Okay, I don't see any questions at this time. Like I wrote in the chat box here, if you have questions at a future time, you're welcome to send me an email at jen@jacksoncccb.com. This program has been recorded, and a copy will be made available on our YouTube channel under Jackson County Conservation. Coming up later this month, we'll have a chance to take our listening skills to the field. I'll be leading a group here in April at Baldwin Marsh. And let me get you the date and time here. All right, that'll be Friday, April 16th at Baldwin Marsh at 8 p.m. And we'll listen first in the parking lot. And then if folks are interested, we will go ahead and go down to the water's edge and see if we can do some visual confirmation on species. And then later on in the month, we will have on Friday, April 23rd at Black Hawk Wildlife Area, our other naturalist, Tony, will be taking a group out for a similar experience of first listening and then going down to visually confirm species. I love the difference of habitat. So Baldwin Marsh is an inland marsh. And then down at Black Hawk, we're going to go down to the banks of the Maquoketa River. Folks, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful spring, and listen, take care.